Thank you, Murdoch. It was very good to hear you speaking and telling all these stories and proposing all these routes of development. And listening to all these speeches, we are gaining a more robust framework for our debates, the last part of this symposium. And now we will start a panel. This panel is composed in a room of the Council of Architecture and Urbanism. We have Melissa. She's a part of the Preto Collective and a group of study of ethnic research.
Melissa is an outreach faculty on designing FAO for the people. As I said at the beginning, this is a powerful little lady, young lady, who has a lot to contribute and a lot to share with us on how these new generations are conceiving and thinking and studying. And they are effectively contributing these processes to the city. Sitting beside Melissa, we have Pablo Benatchi. I quickly mentioned him before. He, in addition to being the chair for UFRJ, has got a PhD in urban planning, and he is a full professor of the FAO, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He presided the committee of the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro's master plan for the city. He has got a very solid curriculum, and he's a great personality who is here offering his house to this event and participating in order to further raise the level of this debate. Sitting to my other side, we have Marcela Abla, who's also another young and powerful lady who's such a big curriculum. She's got a PhD in urban planning from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro with the Sandwich University, or Sandwich Studies at the UPC in the Catalan. She also secured her master's degree in housing, and she is currently the deputy secretary, the municipal secretary for housing in the city of Rio de Janeiro. She's the vice president for the Southeast region of the Institute of Architects of Brazil, and she is the co-chair of the IAB Rio de Janeiro. IAB is the Brazilian Institute of Architects. She's a collaborating member of the Center for Research in Architecture and Urbanism in the Lisbon University. To her side, we have Paulo Protásio, whom I introduced at the beginning of this talk. Another very powerful person who has already shared many aspects of his experience with us. And in addition to us, we will also have Osmar Lima, who's a production engineer, graduated from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. She's got a master's degree in production engineer from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro as well, with a CFA certification. He's been working for the BNDES for 2 years. He's investment manager for companies of closed capital. He's the head of municipal projects for destatization, and he's currently chair of development projects and public assets, public construction assets. At the end of this panel, when we move on to the questions, we will have Soren participating with us directly from Copenhagen. The dynamic we are looking at having here is that we will open up the floor. Paulo Gontijo from CEDURP. I apologize. I do not have a list here, but he has been so kind to represent CEDURP, which is our focal point here in Rio de Janeiro. for these processes in connection with the port zone. So he's going to be sharing a few minutes with us. He's not on the panel, but he is remotely participating with us. And coming back to the previous point, the idea is to give 5 minutes to each speaker so they can talk about some of these suggestions and dynamics for development that will be starting from a central point. As Murdoch very clearly said, it's the so-called the center of the downtown, but this center is geographically displaced from the downtown. This was explained before. So having said that, we will then move on to more direct dialogue. We can start with Melissa. Okay, very good. Can you all hear me? Morning, everybody. I would like to start by thanking you all for participating through social media, through the YouTube and UIA channel. First of all, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. For those who are in other time zones, I would like to thank the International Congress of Architects and Denmark Institute as well, and to the presentation of the other speakers who have contributed to a very fruitful panel. After all that has been said, all the considerations shared today, I believe that this is a very important, that these roles have been part of these processes, particularly when we consider the people. As was said before, including some of the words that Soren shared with us, we need to understand who are the people who are going to be affected by all of these urban development processes in the city of Rio de Janeiro, the cities in Denmark, and to think about the differences that can be translated and how they can be translated, considering that Denmark is a country with very different HDI from Brazil's. And we have those differences, but we can actually bring those differences together as we have the UIA slogan, all worlds, one single world, so that we can understand one another and interact, so that the world architecture capitals are insurgent, they are dynamic, they are collective, and they are interactive, because participatory process within architecture and urbanism is a very important process. So that projects like these are futuristic in the sense of looking forward to the future. We obviously need to consider the past, what has been done, what was done in the past throughout those decades and centuries in Brazil and the world, and in Rio de Janeiro specifically, but we also have to have an outlook on how it affected the population and how we can develop in urban terms so that discourse remains compatible with reality, because there's a plural, there's a dynamic life in these realms, and we need to factor in all of the items and all of the people who are in those places. So looking at urban mobility, for instance, and fostering transportation, looking at intermodality, thinking about the integration of all transport modes, which is important. And we also have to consider the cultural aspects that can be impacted either positively or negatively. So we need to find an equilibrium. We need to strike a balance in our design, and all of those discourses have to be put to practice, because the Rio landscape is a dichotomic one. It is something like a collage, patchwork, and we need to consider all of these different patchworks with engagement, so we can understand how this central axis can actually spread around in order to influence and to be influenced, as Paulo Freire used to say. Though he's not an architect, he's not an urban planner at all. He was an educator. He's a patron of education here in Brazil, actually. So he wrote this article in which he spoke about educational cities. where he said that the city are us and we are the city. So cities are both educational and educative. So we can learn from the cities and we can teach. We can learn from people who live in the city. So interdisciplinarity within architecture and urbanism. It's very important to have someone who can actually listen. An architect, an urbanist can be an element of mediation between the cities and the projects that will take place in those cities. So I believe we can deal with and emerge these dynamics so that Rio de Janeiro as a city can continue as an example, as a role model that deals with all of the problems that we have, with all of the limitations. We have to also be able to look at it from the racial, from the economic, and from the social point of view, how those elements influence the city so that everybody can benefit from the projects, from the construction projects. So I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak, and I am looking forward to listening to our co-panelists. Thank you very much, Melissa. Let's pass the floor now to Pablo. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those who are in other parts of the world. It's very nice to have this this panel in our local house here. I'd like to start by Rita. Rita shows an example of public-private partnership. Areas of interventions, 238 hectares. This University City Island has 548 hectares. So it's half of the University City here in the city campus, university campus. So this University City is the size of Copacabana, Ipanema, and Leblon together, to give you an idea of the urban terms. The issue posed in these cases is that it seems to be a very good example of public-private partnership. Unfortunately, in Rio, the recent example is the Wonderport, which is a public-public partnership, which is a strange thing because the Porto Maravilha can only be feasible by the fact that Caixa Econômica has bought the economic assets. So it's a very strange example because these activities are usually not single-handedly public. Also, after Soren's presentation, we can consider that all of those methodologies can also be a very important catalog because we check the level of apprehension or democratic management of the cities through those plans, but there are some ideas that can be discussed. The first point is the idea of using the central railroad station, which is a long idea. And when I started my profession in Brazil, I worked for Sergio Bernardes, and I am one of the initial designer of that. The idea was Sergio's, but I designed it. But why would Sergio's idea be different from Soren's idea? Because Sergio's idea would connect two very similar urban fabrics. Meaning the design I made very close to Maracanã, but if you look at the central line of the railroad, you will have this different housing structures and the Rio de Janeiro structure. So you would have continuity from one end to the other, which is not the case of Central do Brasil. Unfortunately, Central do Brasil, the railroad, on the one hand, you have Presidente Vargas, which is one of the main access for motor vehicle travel. The city may change, but if it does change, it will hardly ever not have that. So this is a major urban scar. When you look at the margins on both sides of the line, you have totally different realities along the railroad. So in urban intervention, it's very important to look at the context. These experiences are happening across the world. Recently, I was in Paris looking at the railroad spread on the left margin of the Seine River, an initiative that could certainly bring a lot of advantage if used in Rio. But for Rita and for Soren, I don't know how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry. But the major difference we have between Copenhagen and Rio de Janeiro, when you look at the square kilometer in Copenhagen, you have per capita income of a certain level. If you look at the same place in Rio de Janeiro, it's a lot smaller, it's a lot lower. So you have a highly segregated city, segregated in the sense that very few rich and very many poor. Our distribution is very violent, as is shown with those 64%. This has a major impact because you have to think about who's actually going to be able to be benefited by this investment. I loved the Murdoch's funding model. I thought it was extremely creative. I think this is one point to be factored in for sure. Now, the IAB, the Institute of Architects in Brazil, it has defended that changing the railroad into a surface subway, surface metro, it's not easy because the subway requires different infrastructure. It moves faster because it has a different braking system. So you'd have to change that system plus the width of the tracks, and that's not easy. But when we look at the Federal University's master's plan, we were informed of this project. Looking at developing a subway line from Bom Sucesso to Ilha do Governador. Ilha do Governador has the same population as Barra da Tijuca, but initially the subway was taken to Barra da Tijuca, but it was not taken to Ilha do Governador. So if you look at the city's asymmetries, it's a very crucial element. Expecting to connect the university campus, the university city, as we refer to it here in Rio de Janeiro, there's somebody who died, and I'm not going to mention his name because he's not going to be able to defend himself. But what I see from that light rail vehicle is that it would be initially covered. It could therefore not connects the university city to the airport. That's out of the question because we had made this feasibility study of that connection between Cidade Universitária and Maracanã per day, meaning 60 or 70,000 people per day. So I think it is crucial for us to discuss mobility issues in light of the concessions. Unfortunately, those concessions provide a lot of power to a concessionaire company. To close my brief intervention here, which includes the idea that the central railroad station area, it's interesting. You have a Porto Maravilha on the side, which is totally empty. Now, do we need new areas of that type? And in closing, I would say, on Thursday, I went to this strategic master plan, and based on this plan, the municipality is looking at investing 35% at national level, the western zone, 35% on the north zone, 5% in the south zone, 15% of the central area, and the other on the Barra da Tijuca. If that comes to materialize, it's important to look at how public resources are managed. Those are cases that should not be disregarded. That moves towards disseminating the master plan. A good master plan is a plan that informs on where to invest, but it has great concerns for the places where you should not invest. If you think that the entire city is suitable for investment, it's actually going to take too long in terms of economic recovery and urban improvement process. So we need focus. We need to focus on public policies. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Professor Pablo. It's good to see how this debate is adding in layers and it's gaining in complexity at every new contribution. So we are helping to build this project of hope for the city of Rio de Janeiro, which we intend to build together. So let's now proceed with our debate. I'll pass the floor to Marcela. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. To all of you who are listening to us and who will be listening to us afterwards, I'd like to start by saying thank you to Guto and to Pablo for the invitation, to Melissa and to Paulo Protásio, and also to Murdoch for sharing this space with you. It's really rewarding despite the distance, despite having so many people at a distance. So we can now be a little closer with all of the necessary protection measures in place, but it's very important to have this kind of socialization. So this opportunity between Rio de Janeiro and Copenhagen is the beginning of a dialogue, and it starts now. It will reach its height in 2023. I believe the next round is going to be the opposite, what we think for Copenhagen from our point of view. And I think Melissa's talk speaks wonders of the reality, of the local reality in Rio de Janeiro, the social issue and the racial issue are both very important. And as Pablo said as well, differences between cities. Paulo Protásio shares these similarities, the commonalities. Both cities have the coastal area as a main attraction. Those cities grew along that coastline, but also they grew inwards. They expanded inwards. Rio de Janeiro experienced great expansion. It's highly dispersed city. And then Murdoch talks about the compact city. They need to rethink our city. So those who are here in this panel, they speak of Rio, and as they do so, they clarify this reality, and that helps enhance the dialogue and also helps us increase our connection with Copenhagen. Rita and Soren's contributions are very important. Indeed, including public partnerships as more elements in our discussions is very important. So there's this port area. How would that PPP, a private partnership, be included in that as a private part in a public investment? So we also have Paulo from CEDURP, and Mr. Osmar from the BNDES. So it's very important for us to have these kinds of thoughts. I am here representing the IAB, obviously, but I am also as the Deputy Secretary for Housing. So I cannot talk about housing policy. We need to discuss the housing policy at the level of the country as well as at the level of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Central area and popular housing is also an urgent issue. I would also like to propose for the future contributions that you spoke a little bit about the possibilities of developing an inclusive housing policy with a focus on a central area. As Murdoch said, it's centrality that's not geographic for the municipality, but it's a metropolitan centrality. So when we think about housing in the central area of the city, it's also going to comprise other municipalities and districts which are connected by the Guanabara Bay. So we social environmental vulnerabilities come into play. Also housing and health, sanitary conditions which have been further aggravated with the pandemic, access to urbanized land. When we think about the downtown area of Rio de Janeiro, those various projects, we have the 10-year master plan for housing. We also have sustainable development plan. We also have Rever Centro, which is a project that has just been approved, as well as the development of municipal housing plan, which is going to be started soon. All of those plans, they will speak of the city. And then what Paulo said in the beginning comes into play, the importance of districts and suburbs. All of those plans are going to be talking, from a high level perspective, sustainable plan according to the city, according to the Agenda 2030, sustainable development goals and for the city. That's a global way of looking at it. Copenhagen can be very helpful. Now, when we came into the municipality, in the districts, what are the local characteristics? During the break, I was talking to Paulo about it. Starting by Copacabana is very good, but it's important to talk about the central areas of the city, but also about the favelas and those districts, virtually districts. So what's the local identity? So understanding the everyday life of every district is very important. So what we miss in the central part of the city in order to be fully participating. For instance, mobility. Yes, we have mobility, but do we have a local market? Do we have like a local bakery in order to enable living in those areas? There's also the housing plan for the port area. There was a plan which was published in 2012. So how can we recover that? Since we have people from the Development Bank here, people from CEDURP, how can we look at this housing plan for the port area? If it were a public operation, as Pablo said, CEPACs did that stop taking in popular housing to those areas. But we also had other issues in place. We have the Minha Casa Minha Vida in cities, which is a program that, as the government's changed, it was ended, and also as the Casa Verde Amarela plan was put in place. So how can we give visibility and use to those housing units that are in existence, that have been in the port for a long time? Those are some of the points that I think we should bear in mind. And in the interest of time, I will conclude quickly with 3 points. Urban vitality, which is something that is being looked for with all those plans, as well as discussed here. Looking for healthy food, for healthy foodscape in more rural areas of the city, it's okay. But when we think about healthy food in the central areas of the city, and also this identity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcelo. We still have 3 people to conclude this panel. I believe that we can now listen to Osmar Lima. He's not here in person. Thank you, Osmar. Hello. I hope you are hearing me well. First of all, good morning, good afternoon, good evening for all that are participating. Special thank you to the Cultural Institute of Denmark. There are some problems with the sound, and we want to make sure that everybody is listening as well as at CAO. So let's do the following. Let's give the floor to Paulo Protásio first, and then we will continue to listen to you, Osmar. Okay, is that right? First of all, I'd like to it's good to have people that are not here in person, but since they have this technical problem, I'll speak. So let's do the following. Maybe listen to Paulo Gontijo first. Nonetheless, I'm going to introduce again, and we will invite Gontijo, and then after him, we will try to listen to Osmar, and then after we will come back to Cal, okay? Paulo Gontijo Ramos, he is the Director of Innovation of Invest Rio. He is a radialist, he is an entrepreneur focused on innovation. He was the council of the Young Entrepreneurs Council. He was the chairman of the Young Entrepreneur Association. He is the father of 2 children. He is from Rio de Janeiro, a carioca, and he loves the city. Can you hear me well? Just trying first. I can hear you. Just a second, please. Can you hear me, people at Cal? Yes, we can listen to you. Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here and to again meet friends such as Paulo Protásio. Just I am from Invest Rio, which is the company of investment of Rio de Janeiro, the Municipality of Rio de Janeiro. We are located at CEDURP in an integrated way, the agency of the municipality. So this shows how the municipality acts toward that with the integration of the port. So we are there because it's been prioritized, and we think on the development of the city as of the port. And so it makes total sense for us to be part in this event today here. I'd like to start by mentioning an aspect regarding the Communication X, which is the human resource. If you draw a line starting at Mauá Square, downtown area, we have many universities such as the IBMEC, SPM Estácio, UFRJ, which accounts for about 250,000 very well trained brains, people that are totally capable of making the economy of Rio de Janeiro emerging from its decay curve that we have been witnessing in the last few years. So our role here is to try to connect opportunities with problem solving. Let me give you some examples. We estimate that in the communication sector, there is a lack of 300,000 positions we have available, and it's open for people. And there are private initiatives that can be brought to supply this market. Those are ways that we have been trying to work towards reverting a very negative panorama of the city, which is the loss of brains to other Brazilian capitals, such as mainly São Paulo. And then we lost the publicity market, we lost technology market, and also we lost our natural towards the island of Florianópolis and other cities. So the result of all that is that Rio de Janeiro is no longer a very interesting city to invest. So therefore, to revert all that, we need to do integration activities. So, for example, reducing the time frame of permits from the municipality, permits that will promote the construction of important areas, and then we'll have a revitalization of the construction sectors. So it's up to us to do what we must to engage new markets and incentive new markets. The port area is a district of innovation and technology, and our goal is to bring about businesses that is aligned with the IST acronym, which is Environment, Sustainable Technology. And we see Rio de Janeiro as this huge lake of possibilities, a wealth of possibilities. And we see we have the vision of the connection with the government, the public sector, and the private sector. We focus also on gathering small micro companies, medium-sized companies with sectors that offer credit to promote this revitalization, the recovery of the economy. There are partnerships that are very well advanced. For example, in the Mathematic Research Center in downtown area that are statistically planning and envisioning the areas that need position. So this has been our role, our cause, the reversion of the harm that has been caused to the Rio de Janeiro in the last years. And it's really a pleasure to be here in this debate. I want to thank the opportunity to be here with you. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for all the participants. I can see you and the landscape behind you, so I know that you are very close to my building, and I'd like to speak about the role of the Development Bank for the structuring of projects. I coordinate a team in the Development Bank that's a bit different than most of you know about this bank. You probably know about the bank in funding projects, but our team is structuring projects, focusing on public real estate assets. We have three main goals. The first one is the revitalization of large urban land. So it has everything to do with what we are speaking here. Second, we are rescuing historic assets. Like in the case of the river, it has everything to do with what was presented by Professor Murdoch. And then thirdly, the speech of Sorning, he mentioned the gap that there are regarding funding. So we focus on opening reusing assets, territorial assets that are reclaimed land. We have already a year and a half of work, and we have already signed very interesting cooperation agreements. One of them is with the Municipality of Rio de Janeiro, and we have a great interaction with Fajardo Secretary, and also we have already interacted with Invest Rio. We have a cooperation agreement with the Docas company in the port region, also with the state of Rio de Janeiro. We have also been doing negotiations with CEDURP and other assets and agreements that we are negotiating. So this brings us to a very interesting role of being able to discuss the city, because after all, the city is the subject of all this project, and how can we contribute with the requalification of the city. So the bank has a very interesting role. And so instead of being just an entity that fund projects, we are now working the public land assets in this process of transformation. And so we have this protagonism. Professor Murdoch mentioned the amount of land that we can claim in the downtown area, and complemented this speech of Soren, how can we used these assets of lands can be very important for a city. So different agencies in the federal level, institutions that have these assets in the city of Rio de Janeiro, and works in an integrated way, making the difference for us to be able to reach a better point. And here the National Development Bank, the BNDES, proposes to be this structuring arm. So that's what I have to say for now. So now let's give the floor back to Protásio, and then we will start properly the debate and the questions from the audience. Guto, what I can say now, it's such a pleasure to be able to participate in this meeting. In this panel, the relationship with this youth that's coming to work together with the municipality and in the National Development Bank, the word of Osmar was very clear and towards the same goal. There was a gap of someone that was able to do so well this tessiture. It's very important that the National Development Bank comes into play in order to solve these difficulties regarding the very process of funding of the Caixa Econômica Federal and also the CEPAC. So he's very welcome. Murdoch, he mentioned you 3 times. He says that the essence is very well understood, and the extension will reach Copenhagen, because Copenhagen had already promoted a similar operation. I'd like to say 3 things before making my proposal. First thing, regarding Melissa, I want to highlight her awareness when she spoke about that. When she said that we are the city, she brought about truth to our panel. The proposal of Copenhagen to reach the citizens, to reach the individual, is extremely important. Otherwise, it won't work. I can say that because I had experienced this process. Many years ago, I created a movement called Rio Mania, and this movement continues until now. Maniac of Rio, and so I believe that it's important, this awareness. It is key, in fact. To Fabio, I must say that there are 2 important references. The first one is him pointing out the differences themselves. That is, players that don't normally communicate, and we must communicate. It's like port and airport. It's impossible to think an environment such as this without this sort of connection, commitment, agreement, and so on. Secondly, it's very important in the process, this vision that the proximity of choices are great. He already indicated that this is good and this is not good. So therefore, an open process, and if civil society takes into its own hand this program, it might work. The perception is that society is outside waiting, and this is not good. Stakeholders must participate, must get organized, and also institutions such as the IAB, the Council of Architecture, the associations, entities. It's a totally coherent action, therefore. Marcela, I have known her for quite a while. She helped us in this operation of really operating even small things. We work that we have a common exhibition, very well done, organized, and disseminated about this process. So her language, which is into the field of action in the municipality, is to believe in the direction chosen. So I see that it's like when you are landing, the airplane has to have a flight plan to be able to take off. And I think that we already have a takeoff plan in our action plan. There is even this flyer that's been distributed the day before yesterday, and that you mentioned in your operations. This is the plan for the resumption of the future of Rio de Janeiro, presented in the municipality in its palace this week. So I want to welcome Osmar and Paulo Gontijo. And I want to extend this welcoming to everyone, even with the Caixa Econômica Federal, which could be here in this panel as well. This chapter of the financial aspects is guided by Guto, and this is the theme. This is the theme of our panel today. So I'd like to propose the following suggestion. First of all, let's talk among ourselves for a thorough action, but let's not miss the opportunities. First of all, the awareness that we see already throughout the world, like the One Habitat language, that's totally different. The so-called Cities Investment Facilities Plan. This program, this investment center for cities, has already been implemented in some cities as pilot projects. And it's so key to bring it to Rio de Janeiro. And it's so interesting that Annie's here. She's the director of the United Nations, and the headquarters of Habitat is in Rio de Janeiro. So it's very meaningful to cross the street and start a conversation with her. The basis of this plan is in the downtown area, and is in Nairobi, but there's no problem today if you are close or far away, because virtually we're all connected. I see that Invest Rio itself can be the initiator of this proposition, because it's qualified to that end. It's been created by a decree law. It has an official institute. It's an official institution, and I know Paulo Gontijo very well. He is a true leadership. He's a young man that has a very strong commitment of citizenship, and Osmar as well, that you've heard. He is also a young man, and he has a very successful mandate already. Thank you, Protásio. Now, I'd like to propose that we move towards the people that had registered for speaking now, or the people and also the audience. So let's move forward towards that. I think this council, it's very interesting. it has a lot to do with current economic situation. You mentioned Murdoch mentioned in his presentation the New Deal and the Marshall Plan. So that in a situation of crisis such as the one we are undergoing, public money, it has to have a lot of focus. So focus is not only look to the large capital, but also to the smaller movements of capital. In the downtown area, there are 186 real estate houses, stories, that belong to the government. Some are ruins, others are well preserved. So we must promote a project a program to recover these real estate assets. I can even help you bring into your hands a project that we have developed a long time ago in the University of Architecture. Since Marcelinha is here, also I have a function for her. She could coordinate such initiatives of recovering these real estate assets, because this can have a huge impact in the city, because each currency, that's real, that is placed in this direction, it has a large and important capillarity. Regarding our economic activity, which is, it's hidden. We think that in the Council of the Architecture and Urbanism, we would lose our collection, but we have noticing that the real estate market is not slow, it's warmed up. In São Paulo, for example, the large amounts of launchings are of smaller apartments. So up to 30 square meters. So this apartment, we must think of towards whom these new launchings are focusing. But for those that have children, so we have to focus on what is the demand for real estate construction, and we must discuss this with Marcela and Osho, and also with the mayor, to establish in the revitalization of the downtown area the profile of population that we aimed at. So, for example, you have a family dwelling there, you need a square for the children. So depending on our plan, I think it's very important to bring back housing to the downtown area. I believe that the development bank should also focus on its initiative associated with a plan of economic recovery that our Council of Architects advocate.
Thank you very much, Pablo. Is Marcela going to speak? Well, since I was mentioned by our colleague, Pablo, I will have the floor. I will take the floor. The Housing Secretary, in addition to those 176 real estate units owned by the state of government, they have a few others which have been evicted for the purpose of a social housing. That would add up to 238 of housing units, which is not much. A small germinated homes, others are well preserved, others are listed. So that requires some attention for that requalification purpose. Bringing BNDES, CEDURP, CAO, and the Denmark Cultural Institute Is that Denmark or Copenhagen? It's Denmark. I apologize. It would be interesting to bring all of those players together to conceive solutions for that area of the city. Reviver Centro is a program that started on a single area of the city. One of the RAs. There are three different RAs in the downtown area, and that started from one. And I think the proposal should actually look at the three of them. So putting this Reviver Centro plan together with the port area plan, plus the other RA, which involves the Cidade Nova, which is the municipality area, the area where the municipality building is located. I would like to accept Benetti's proposal. He was my professor, and he's currently the president of CON, and is my co-worker now. And I believe that this panel might yield good research work. And housing is an issue that's crucial in all of its aspects. And what Pablo says comes in handy now. Studying the families. They are young families, as Melissa said, but Murdoch said too. Are they young people? Are they only young people? Are they families? Do they need a square or playgrounds for the children? So what's the identity of the place? So this research that's mentioned and developed by Paulo Protásio, that encourages, since Rio 92, because we do talk about the desire to bring this positive energy to the city as hope. So this proposal has to be made, as Sora mentioned as well, from the top down and from the bottom up in the two ways, because the government has to be committed as well, but people first. So we have to understand who are the ones who are currently residing in the area, and who are the ones who are going to be benefited by a real estate market, but also by a public housing market. So that's it. Thank you very much. I accept the challenge. I accept the invitation too. Osmar, Paulo, Melissa. Melissa is in line. I don't know how do I join this line? How do I take a number to speak? Who would like to speak first? Osmar, perhaps. Afterwards, Paulo Gontijo is gonna try and talk to us as well. So we'll segue with him, and then we'll pass the floor to Melissa. Is it myself now? First, I'd like to thank you for the challenge posed by Professor Pablo and also by Marcela. And I'd like to make a point that I think is very important to be mentioned now, because it's all along the lines we have been working with. We've been engaging the municipality, and it's not for the purpose of the municipality, but for the purposes of the city. And the previous talk, the state real estate units were mentioned, and municipal real estate units were mentioned. I think you might be wondering, in terms of federal properties, when we talk about the SPU and the CEDURP, with Paulo and Garantes, and we talk about the INSS real estate, how many public buildings are located in the city of Rio, particularly in the central part of the city. And so we have been engaging with the municipality, and I speak on behalf of the Development Bank, to start a study along the lines of the challenge that has been put forth, whose objective is, actually the question in this study is, how to use public real estate assets in order to leverage the transformation process for the downtown area of Rio de Janeiro. The study, we're looking forward at doing that with the Development Bank's resources in order to deliver that to the population of Rio de Janeiro. A bank that is located in the downtown area of Rio de Janeiro, and its history is totally connected to the city, and most of the staff is composed of Rio de Janeiro natives, so we should not miss on an opportunity like this. And I think it goes well in line with what we have been discussing, and receiving your support in developing the scope of the study is a very welcome move, because this study has to be relevant. It doesn't make any sense to produce, just a pack of papers that is not going to be used by anybody. So we want to develop a relevant study, and this is no doubt going to spread out to the specific project initiatives in other parts of the city. So we would like to build a narrative that is integrating the private market, as was mentioned by Professor Pablo, which is not slowing down, much the other way around. So to integrate this private market narrative with the stock of public real estate stock can be very, very fruitful for our vision. And this is what we're looking at implementing. So the challenge is accepted. I would like to thank you for that, actually. And we're certainly going to further elaborate on this talk here in many other future talks. Excellent. Let's pass the floor now to Paulo. I would like to just compliment on the study of the populations that you want to do in order to bring those populations to the region, to live in the region. That could be integrated with the profile of the businesses we're looking at bringing to the region, as we said before, the ESG issue. But it's very important to have this dialogue remain after this panel. So Invest is totally available for that. But there are phenomena, for instance, digital nomadism. The city has to be prepared for that. Companies changing their working regimes. Instead of 5 days on an in-person basis, I don't know how BNDES is, but many companies are moving to 3 to 2, 3 days working at home and 2 days working in the office. This is all a matter, this is all going to bring the impact on local retailers and the transport. This is totally not clear to us how it's going to be after the pandemic. The only way for us to respond to those changes is going to be by means of dialogue. So we are making ourselves available. We would like to elaborate on this talk afterwards. We can actually take many of these talks at CEDURP/invest. Obviously, we're paid by public money to do that, so we're totally available to do that. Please liaise with us. Perfect, Paulo. I will now pass the floor to Melissa, but my proposal is, if you agree, is to include, to invite Anders, who is listening to us, and Soren, who would have joined the session with questions and so on. So if he is connected online, he could participate in this dialogue straight away, because new pathways are being suggested and possibilities for partnership. And the intention of this panel is to strengthen this dialogue and to strengthen these liaisons. I'll pass the floor right away to Melissa. I was thinking very deeply about each contribution, and it's great to be in this panel with people who have, very active minds. And I'd like to ponder about the housing, popular housing issue, and also the issue of reviving this downtown areas. Reviver Centro, that's the name of the program. We could think about reaver, meaning to rehabilitate the center, to review what happened since old centuries ago, because we know how the city was developed, how the downtown area of the city was developed based on squatting and occupations and dismantling hillsides and the landfills and many things. So this is now today connected with people who used to live in those squatted areas or occupations, a port zone or in other buildings, who were people who had a local community kind of a relationship. So it was easy for them to be in the downtown area, living here, working and studying in the downtown area. And now we know that some of those occupations, there were removals here, and they were taken to faraway zones. And they even reached out to the western zone of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Being displaced from downtown to this zone, the western zone, this is something that takes about a couple of hours, perhaps 3 hours, if you are lucky enough, in order to make that journey. So thinking about the AT, which is the technical assistance and housing of social interest, that's a very important pathway for us in order to meet this challenge and to invite the local community, invite them to the focus of this issue. in order to engage in the exercise of putting urban public policies in practice. Also for the people who were removed from the downtown area, not only looking at a new downtown, but also to these events that actually happened because of the colonial past that our city has as a consequence of that past. So representing this address to the House of Social Interest, Carl, where Carl has done many projects looking at that and has developed a lot of thoughts around that theme. So it's important to put it all to practice and to provide that as an idea. Wonderful. So we have, do we have connection with Soren? Soren, can you join
Yes.
the debate? Are you okay? I see his image. Very good. Thank you. So please, you can speak. You have the floor now, Soren.
Okay, thanks a lot, and thank you all in the panel for very, very interesting remarks you have had. All are very, very important. And for me, as not being living in Rio de Janeiro, it gives me information and knowledge of how and what we need to pay attention to. One thing which I noted down. I have noted 30 or 40 things down here, but one thing which is worrying me a little bit is that I think it was Paulo Gontijo who said that Rio is no longer interesting to invest in, and that remark is very, very important because if that is the general perception, that Rio is going through on a pathway where it's not worth of investing in Rio, then Rio is on an economic downturn, which will also affect all the population in Rio, of course, and firstly the most vulnerable groups. So this is a situation that must be changed, and I think the suggestion I had in my presentation could be a start of this. Of course, we should not just jump in and build a lot of good stuff, a lot of good buildings and stuff, and so on and so forth. We need to base it on research and knowledge. So what you have been discussing the last time here, the last 15 minutes here, about what are the people who is going to live in the city, who are the people that are being affected by it, what is the future actually for the city. I think it's very, very important to have the monoculars on and looking into the future to see what are the new trends. Because when we are designing cities and building cities, we are building them for the next 100 years. So it's very, very important that we, before we start any planning, any construction, that we are monitoring and assessing and researching what are the future trends. I mentioned autonomous vehicles. I mentioned e-commerce in my presentation. E-commerce, for example, is extremely important when we are discussing cities, because today we are going to the city center to buy stuff. But in Denmark, today around 20% of all goods are traded on the internet. And in 5-10 years, it will be 85%. So we're not using the city to go there to buy stuff. We are using the city as an entertainment space, a market space, a space where we are testing and trying and having coffee with our friends and so on and so forth. And then we go back home and we buy goods on the internet. So the shop space in the cities will change. The need for shop space will change. And also, as you mentioned, Paulo, the Corona situation has changed the way we are organizing our work life. Now it's allowed to stay home 1, 2, 3 days a week to work from there. So what is the future need for office buildings in the city? All this stuff has to be collected and examined and studied, and has to inform what are the future investment objects and how can we change Rio to a situation where it will be extremely interesting to invest in the city. And we can do that if we crack the nut. What are the future needs? And build for the future, and not on the perceived future based on what we know from the years before us. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Soren. Now I'm going to mingle some questions that I received, and we can continue the debate adding these questions from the audience to increase the complexity and the interest. And so the next question is for Soren, but maybe others can answer as well. The question comes from Fernando. I don't have his last name. It comes in Spanish. And the question is, what are the concrete measures that Copenhagen take to avoid the gentrification in the new neighborhoods? Do you have such measures, and what are them exactly? Could you tell us, Soren, about it?
Yes, I can briefly mention what measures has been taken, and there has been a development of these measures from the first development we did. It was called Ørestad, which was started out in the mid 1990s, and the new development Nordhavn, which was started out in 2009. What we have done is that we have added an act to the development law of the areas, that 25% of the apartments must be rented apartment, and there must be a diversity of the different ownerships of apartments in the district. In that, and there's is also a part of the apartments that are socially paid for. So in that sense, we have a diversity of ownerships, and the whole idea is, of course, to bring affordable housing to the city, but also to create diverse communities.
Thank you very much, Soren. Anders said that he wanted to comment it. Can you enter now, Anders, please?
Sure. I'd like to just to pick up a little bit on Søren's comment about the future and how we understand it. I have this like sort of course, we have all these very sinister views and very much, big risks in the future. We all know that the climate crisis is completely, utterly urgent. I have this little bit of a playful, way of talking about what the future cityscape or urban space is going to be like. We're going to drown in coffee. With that, I mean that we're going to have cities and city centers of experiences. The city is going to be very much about experience. And in my understanding, and sort of like picking up on what Søren said, that it's gonna not be about going and buy a new sofa or anything like that, because that you will do from home. So why would you go there? You go there to have experiences and be together, and that really emphasizes, of course, I mean, also that you need to live there. That is, of course, what, you know, all the habitation that is being discussed. And by the way, you know, I want to thank everybody for the great contributions in this talk. But I just I would like to say this because it really emphasizes the urban space, because that's where we're going to be. We're going to be together, and we're going to want to have experiences. So it is really a common resource, and it tends to be very much. If you look at the strong points of Copenhagen, and what Rita brought forward, is that we have an attractive urban space that is accessible and it's safe, and from so we, there's a real whole social dimension there, obviously, that is very urgent to look at, maybe, and to, in a revised way in Rio. And also, I would like to bring it back to the future talk here. We also see in Rita's presentation that they are planning a project that is like maybe a quarter or half finished in 2035, which is the Lynetteholm Islands. And one thing that I sort of, as a local bridge that brings this you know, look from outside into Brazil, I see that very often you know, initiatives in Brazilian development have a hard time of getting continuity. It's a real problem. There seems to be like a culture of obstruction or interruption. When the mayor changes, the whole staff of the municipality changes. Very often, ideas that were specifically, you know, doing well will not be continued, because you need to show your give your imprint on it. I think these traditions are very destructive, and I'd love to, you know, hear the panel's you know, understanding of how could we improve that. That is a cultural thing. We didn't even need to build anything. How could we do something about this to facilitate continuity, to be able to plan far ahead and secure developments? Thanks.
Thank you, Anders. It's very interesting to see how extraordinary landscape Rio de Janeiro has. All the waters that are all around us. We see it all the time, either in the lakes or in the bay or in the floods even. There are many lakes. Nonetheless, the public spaces are extremely used. It is a city of the meeting on the street. It is a meeting of public generations, public spaces. So, speaking about the integration of the private market with the public reserves and the need to do this survey of all in all the spheres, municipal, state, and federal, and the importance that the government not only understand strategically such spaces, but also to regulate the uses and this market, this land market. It offers many possibilities, but there is a need of a regulatory force to try to balance these masses in the city, both in the downtown area, in the southern area, and expand into the whole metropolitan area. Anyone want to speak in this regard? I want to comment on that. Of course, there is a pathway already started, and how to do it, how to continue. I want to propose that you at the Council of Architecture and Urbanism, and also Guto, and also you, Guto and Murdoch, we must establish a plan. I believe that we should start. I want to mention a reception that there was when Francisco Laranjeira, one was, and the president of CEDURP and the president of DOCAS. The conclusion that we reach is that we must conduct a survey of what do we have, who wants to do what. So this sort of action is key to understand the players, and so so you have this homework, and we must take this second stage. So I want to show the similarity between Copenhagen and Rio de Janeiro. We are very close, really. Maurício Duarte Pereira is a Brazilian architect, and he works with Galeão in Copenhagen. He has just told me, Paulo Gontijo, that he was your colleague at SEAT studying. So the world is very small, and we are connected, and you already have a step in Copenhagen. Paulo? So there is already a relationship established that even goes beyond Copenhagen, that works Niterói, the municipality of Niterói, and its similarities with Malmö. Thank you. It is very good, very potent, apropos. Now let's proceed to another question from the audience. It's not directed to anyone. It's from Mariana Portilha Baez. What will be the future of the favelas in Rio de Janeiro, squatters, with this project? How will this population be benefit from this project? Anyone want to comment on that? Mariana, it's a great question. This is a key element for us to reflect upon. When Jantana was here, from all possible solutions, the only one that's not acceptable is the favela to remain in its place. But Jantana said the opposite of that. Favelas, squatters, are a demonstration of a huge creativity and innovation in the ways of solving problems of housing that of people that were not supported by the government, and they created such interventions. Of course, on this whole development, according to the focus, it's key that any public policy has a focus on its side effects, that it does not cause a problem to the housing that are located there, and that they take care of this very serious social and economic investment done by such families that live in this shantytown already sometimes 100 years ago. And Rio de Janeiro can be proud of promoting a program called Favela Bairro, and had started a pathway of changing relationship between the shantytowns and the city, accepting the favelas as a different form of urbanization, not better, not worse, but just different. So therefore, the government must be there building a public-private relationship that allows for the organizations of the shanty towns themselves to have autonomy, that to together with the public to intervene in the territory. And so your question is very important. And whenever we conduct any intervention, we must not look to the city as an empty place. There are people, and the favela is one of the most important groups of people that we see in our daily lives.
Thank you, Professor. I would like to pick up on something that you said and make remarks about the project we looked at yesterday about commons and communities. Here in Brazil, it is being developed. It's actually being developed in many countries, but here in Brazil, it starts from the idea of community, and perhaps not by chance, having favela as a starting point, particularly to try to find solutions that are already there. So to have this view for these magnificent solutions that are developed in those territories. So I'll pass the floor now to our to Vanessa, and then I'll pass the floor to Murdoch. Oh, thank you for the question. It is indeed very important. As Pablo mentioned, the song, not better, not worse, just different. So it's very important to think about it's very important to think about the favela territories, not only as favelas in the city, because some thinkers conceive them as two worlds apart. But the favela is the city. The city has many different ways of dwelling. And one of them is there are many ways of dwelling in the city, and one of them is to dwell in a favela. So it's very important to also to look at how we get to these players, to these stakeholders. Paulo mentioned the research. We need to research. As a researcher myself, a future architect and future urban planner myself, I like the effort of researching. So it's also to think. It's also very important to think about how we get to those stakeholders, not as a laboratory for research, but to think of those people as ourselves, because the city also teaches and at the same time as it learns from us. So it's important to be able to be a mediator within that realm. And in closing, I think it's very important, as I know this thesis, which was awarded a prize, developed by Gabriela Leandro Gaia. She talks about body, discourse, and territory. She talks about the narrative based on the perspective of Carolina Jesus, who became a doctor honoris causa from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. And this lady who lives in a favela in Rio de Janeiro, so she speaks from her perspective, how she sees the city, how she sees the favela, how it happens, and how public policy should be fostered across the territory. So it's very important for us to listen so that our policies are actually focused on the common good, on a greater good. Wonderful thoughts, Melissa. Quick comment on your speech. I like it very much. You mentioned it twice, actually. You said that the city teaches and learns, and I think this personalization is very interesting. I like to say that we are not in the city, we're not located in the city, but we are the city. The city is our collective body. So it's a very interesting talk. I'll pass the floor to Murdoch. This question is very important, as recently we have not seen major investments with repercussions around the favelas. Favelas are there, they exist, and that they've actually turned the key, as Pablo mentioned. They used to be seen as from a negative perspective, and now we understand that that was a solution, an ideal solution? Not really. There's still a lot to do. We have to integrate those people, those territories, those lines to the city, just as we are adapting. And you know something, I'd like to point at the following, and I think that's how I see the question. How can those projects actually reverberate towards the communities? I will take a few steps back, and I'll remember the Porto Maravilha contract, whose investment, if I'm not mistaken, is that everything that was generated at the Porto Maravilha would only be reinvested in the local region. That was a model, and I'm not going to make any evaluation whether it's positive or negative. It's up to individual thoughts or conclusions. But if the city of Rio de Janeiro has this valuable asset, everything that the city obtains, be it the district of Central or the creation of territories at the Porto Maravilha or creating territories at the Santos Airport, whatever resource has to be shared equitably amongst the local residents of the city. If it's a favela, not favela, the white, blacks, religious, non-religious, and so on, so forth, there's no difference there. And we should really integrate the favela territories to the city as a whole. I think this has already been changed. Everybody here has an understanding of that. Everybody looks for solutions. And community people themselves, they're looking for solutions. I see in a situation is totally different from what I used to see 30 years ago. And as Lucio Costa saw it, favelas they had to be removed, and it's not what the way it is today. It has to be seen, understood, and integrated to the city, given the regular possibilities. Thank you, Murdoch. Perhaps another panel members would like to make any comments, complement, if possible. A very brief contribution here. Some of the points that were made by Soren earlier about investments in Rio de Janeiro. It's clear that we have already achieved the tipping point, moving from a decline to an ascending moment. I think it's strategically important for the city of Rio de Janeiro, generating jobs. In terms of generating jobs, we have had consistent losses in the past 4 years, and for the past 5 months, we have had increased number of jobs in Rio de Janeiro. It's important to say that the Rio has an opportunity of window from being a city in decline to be a city of recovery. It's a single opportunity, a unique opportunity we have that requires coordinated efforts between the public sector, the private sector. We have missed some important opportunities, and I don't think we should waive any opportunity like this. Concerning developing in the downtown area, again, I think it's another opportunity. It's a gigantic offer or gigantic supply of public services. We have talked extensively about it. From the point of view of inserting or introducing the favelas, I think it's important because we think about attracting investments, looking at how to integrate them. I have been working on this project, which is an attempt to attract as a fashion design hub, together with the design sector. We want to have the textile sector, also the manufacturing sector for the prototypes. That will help integrate the labor from the Morro da Conceição and then the surrounding area. So what we have to do is to put together this metaphor we developed internally, the Catholic University design students with the local seamstress from the Morro da Conceição, so that it will bring a positive effect to the entire city, rather than the Catholic University students should move to the downtown area and to work and then go back home, and that wealth is not going to reach the interior part, the central side part of the city. Concerning favela, I do not have any answers. It's more of a question, but that has to do with the environmental dimension. perhaps I'm silly enough, but I don't see any discussion on reducing the environmental impact, be it by means of inspections or enforcement, introducing cheaper technologies or whatever, but I am concerned with that. How can we make favelas perhaps grow, but without having any environmental impacts, excessive environmental impacts, particularly on the Tijuca forest? That's the question. I'd like to learn from you more than anything else. And I'll pass the floor to Murdoch, who asked the floor. But I will say that we'll have just one or two questions because this is already our final moments, and then we'll move on to final conclusions and we will move on. Murdoch, please. What I'd like to say is Paulo's concern is relevant. How can we integrate favelas and reducing the environmental impact? There are two factors we should analyze, Paulo. First one was included in my talk. We'll have a demographic curve and housing pressure that will decrease as of 2030 if we continue along the lines of the current economy. If all of us here can actually improve the situation of the city of Rio de Janeiro, we're most likely going to provide for a good part of the population to be able to move about. So that's what I've seen as I talk to people in communities. People sometimes they secure financial support to leave the community, but they don't want to leave the territory because they have developed their lives there. They have roles and relations which have all been consolidated. And I'll tell you, for a number of years now, we have developed this technology, this methodology to look at these territories in order to have very specific interventions. And this is all documented. I can share that document by email to you afterwards. We have more than 70 pages of research and data. It's something that myself and other professors worked on a few years ago that has been developed and matured. Now, is there any possibility to do that? Yes, we can, and we can improve. We should remember the population is likely to reduce after 2030, and this is also going to improve our situation. Thank you very much, Murdoch. Question asked by Edson Maciel addressed at Melissa, but I'd like to open that to the floor and perhaps expand a bit. He says, how can we mainstream urban policies along a racial perspective in order to definitively leverage sanitation or sorting out the historical debt that Brazilian society has with the Black population? So I'd like to address that to Melissa, but I would like to expand that to the gender issues and all the other issues which are intrinsically connected to social construction in the city of Rio de Janeiro, or of the city of Rio de Janeiro. Thank you for the question, Edson. Concerning that, we know that our city, the downtown area, as I said before, were actually built by enslaved people's hands, despite building, and sometimes they even designed part of those constructions. They do not have the rights to inhabit those constructions, and that goes on until today. So in order to reverse that situation, it's very important for us to include so we have to think about how to break with those barriers. Mention was made about the environmental impacts caused by, as they are actually a consequence of favela growth. This is closely connected to environmental racism because, as Soren said in his presentation, he showed a map that indicated that favelas were intrinsically connected to the Black population, not only favelas, but peripheral areas where there's no basic sanitation, where there's no access to a sewer system, or to water, or to food or education. All of that is the city, so it's important that those people are strongly connected by means of in practice organizations so that they are included under that point. Another important thing is how to look at, and I was speaking about the Black population, but also about gender issues. Women, you see that more architects and urbanists, they have to be in places like those, like these, where we are now, acting in practice and in theory in the developing cities. Because if we listen and we practice only based on the old model of a city, the elites model of a city, the hegemonic model, heteronormative, and also a eugenistic model of cities, if we do only that, we will not be able to progress. And that requires Black women and peripheral architects and urban planners are actively operating on these urban public policies, that they are included in the debate, because that doesn't happen, unfortunately, because of difficult access to opportunities. That reaches out to education, housing, health, until they reach higher education, not only accessing higher education, but remaining there. I'm about to finish, but that's not a reality for many people I know. So I'd like to invite myself, to include myself. Many people have made invitations to participate in this challenge, and this city 2021, 2023. So I'd like to invite myself to sort of, be an intruder, but to participate by playing an active role in order to share some of those thoughts to the practice developed around those issues. Perfect, Melissa. I think the attempts of this panel is to say that this is an urgent and necessary discussion. It has to be implemented by these public officials and all of these representatives here. Everybody has to be engaged. But the population, be it Black population, poor population, female population, they have to be part of this panel, not only as object of research or analysis, but as researchers, as an ensemble of this knowledge building to develop the city. Thank you very much. Marcela, you have the floor now.
I think that Melissa have said it all. It's necessary to think not only about ethnic issues or racial issues, but also the gender issues, the age issues, like a young Black woman is different than a Black old woman. So so add to this the different stages of life, in addition to the gender and racial and ethnic issues. So the other question is about the future of the favelas or communities, and adding the issues, the social, gender, and race issues. Today, after 15 years of a program called Favela Bairro, that thought of this aspect of inclusion of the people that inhabit the favelas in the city, after all this experience, that we must not forget the environmental aspects, as our colleague of CEDURP has said, as well as the social, race, gender, and age issues, understanding these families and build together. So to present a problem and listen to the solution, like the role of the technicians, the role of all the players, the role of the architects is to listen and then give visibility to the people in all their differences and build together. So today, the understanding of a program such as Favela Bairro from 1994, one of the first policies in the construction of a housing secretariat. What do we add? Can we add today that previously we didn't know? Maybe the climate aspect, a range of technical knowledge. Technical assistance in improving housing. So there is already an act. How can we put into place, enforce it? So 2 cities in totally different countries that can exchange between CAU, between an institute, between Paulo, between Murdoch, between a university, and the civil society. So listen to the society to reduce a housing deficit by means of integrated housing programs like Favela Bairro, Favela District, translating the name. So there are large housing complexes. There are the favelas with its own identities. They improve in the technical aspect, improving the qualitative aspects. And the quantitative deficit would be the offering of units in urbanized land and access to the formal and social market. So also, therefore, the central area of São Paulo have all these features and diversities. It carries the signature. And here, not to listen only women, Black women, but not only listen to them, but having them as players in offering solutions. So giving visibility to the diverse city. This hearing, I liked what our colleague has said about a city being an organism. It is like a big body that encompasses all this diversity. Now, I'd like to ask the participants of the panel to give their final comments. And also, Soren, would you like to start? Give us your final comments.
Yes, thank you very much for the word. I think the discussion here clearly states that we are at the brink of transition. We need to find a new way to organize and develop our cities. We need to find a way where we can, for Rio, change this downturn in economy. We need to find a way where we can diminish or reduce the environmental stresses coming from the informal sector, from the favelas. We need to, as society, to find a solution, and the solution has to be accepted and work with the people living in the favelas. Otherwise, it's not a solution. But we need to find the solution together with these guys. That's really important. Then it's fantastic important to look at the future, to study the future science, to see in what direction is the city going, and in what direction do we want to push the city, because the reality is that if we do nothing, the city is progressing into a future, but we can as well look to it and try to guide the direction of this future city development. If we don't do anything, it just go in a random direction, and we have no control of it. So we need to, now where we are at this brink of transition, to find our own way, to understand what is the future, and to design and develop for the future, and not against the future. We cannot fight against climate change, but we need to work with the climate change. We cannot fight against the next 20 years pollution coming from favelas, but we can work with it and try to find solutions, so we slowly, in a steady pace, can overcome, and finally in 20 years, 30 years time, have resolved a lot of these questions. But the time to rethink cities and our the way we have organized in cities. The time is now to do that, because we are at the brink of a huge transition, and it's now to rethink. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Soren. Now, Paulo, would you like to offer your comments? You mean Paulo Gontijo or Paulo Protásio? Oh, you yourself. Okay. So thank you very much for this invitation. It's really a pleasure to participate in this debate. I learned a lot. I think I could contribute with the vision that vision of what we want to do at Invest. So think of the development of the city as in a holistic way towards a sustainable future. So it's towards a future. So I really agree with the idea that the cities will have a future, and it's up to us to guide what this future will be. So I'd like to conclude putting myself available. We must dialogue, and I think we have this window of opportunity, and we cannot dismiss it. So I'm available. My contact, Anders or Protásio, they have. Please, if you can forward it to anyone you want, and please talk to us whenever you need. Our role in Invest is to make the Rio a more prosperous city. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the opportunity to participate in this debate, in this panel, in this lesson that I received in the last few hours. I would like to comment quickly what Anders mentioned, which is the mention of the Development Bank. Anders said Brazil seems to have an issue with continuity. Things always are discontinued throughout time. The bank has 70 years. The people working there has already been worked there for 30 years, and I will pretend to work there for the next 15 years, as well as my team at least. So this is an opportunity of the bank to be part of this debate and to be an institution that has this approach, long-term approach. And we are at service of all of you, mainly our society, to build projects and improve the quality of the project conducted in the country. And in this way, we are to make ourselves available to think our city and improve our city. This is the message. Please count on us. Count with the National Development Bank. In the same way as Paulo, I'm also available. Anders has my cell phone, and please make it available to all. I already sent a message to Anders that I want to start a conversation with Rita and Soren to discuss cases and ideas, and I also want to do that with CAU and IAB and the municipality so that we can develop. I believe we have a lot of information to exchange and move towards the future together. 100% available. Please count on us. Thank you. Murdoch, please. I'd like to conclude adding to Soren's speech. The best way for you to forecast the future is you yourself building it, and this is our role. Thank you very much. I'd like to convey a virtual hug to all of you, and we continue in the Congress, in the UIA Congress. I don't know if you can see, this is a red card and a yellow card. I think the activity we have currently in society, attention, and you are expelled from the field. I want to present two opportunities.
At this moment with Copenhagen, since they like soccer too, since they as capitals, as my friend Murdoch said, it's in our hands. Thank you. Very well. I'd like to express my gratitude too for the invitation, for the debate, for the enriching experience sharing, and I hope that this sharing practice continue so that we can put this research group together from today, and the municipality has open doors for this dialogue for all of the stakeholders here and also with the entire society. Thank you very much. Good day, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. For us at CAU-RJ, CAU-RJ, it's very important for us to have this panel. It's an honor to have spent this morning with you. I'd like to say at least that for the cities, there's this possibility to reinvent themselves, but this reinventing can never be not shared. So having this diversity perspective, looking at participants here and then participants outside, that is the way to get there, the capacity to reinvent the future, to have a plural future that requires that effort. The racial map that Soren showed us, I have never seen a map like that, but it speaks for itself. So it's very important for us to have that as a reference for us. I would like to share my thoughts with Paulo Gontijo, with this concern with hybrid, because we can be developing a plan for the central area of the city with an eye on the pre-pandemic times. And given the current times of the pandemic, with this idea of a hybrid, this is not only the aspect of the major offices that are reduced, but we have to consider support services, restaurants, shops, and so on. Mobility is something that we also have to try and bring it to the forefront as well. And the commitment is made. Osmar, Paulo, Protásio, Osmar, Lima, Guto, Marcela, Melissa, everybody's invited to join, because we are leaving this place today with some homework to do. Thank you. I would also like to express my gratitude for the invitation. It's an honor to be here sharing these moments with you. I would like to express my gratitude to CAU, to the Cultural Institute of Denmark. It was very fruitful for me to listen and to be listened to, I believe, at this moment. It was, as Pablo just said, in his final considerations, that we also have to think at the moment of the pandemic, to think about that moment and how cities will have to be reinvented by resorting or relying on the co-participation of everybody in this debate. So we have to continue to implement dialogue as such with Copenhagen, but also with other states, so that we will be able to share experiences, because we certainly have a lot to learn from one another, so that the world architectural capitals are insurgent, dynamic, and collective, and decolonial as well, and in the future to be more empowering, because culturally empowering, because the culture we have in Rio de Janeiro, the culture we have in Copenhagen, can also contribute a lot to this practice of future cities, with an eye on the present, always at the same time. Thank you very much. Thank you, Melissa. Thanks, everybody. Thank you all who are here, and those who are not here at the panel, at this table with us, but have been together participating, and the others who have been watching us from all over the world, listening to this discussion, which is local, but it's also global, because this understanding is inseparable. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. We do have a whole lot of homework to do. Actually, our pillows have been speaking about it for a long time. This necessary and important apprehension and this imprisonment, those mouthpieces, which are necessary but also very important, because they help us think and to reconcile or to think of these spaces not as a table around which friends will sit and talk, but rather as people who get together looking at collaboration and continuity. I will share some quotes here very briefly in order to close this encounter, this dialogue. Quote, human life is divine, it's current. I will tell you, I was afraid of some blind happiness and ferocious blindness that was beginning to take a hold of me. And I was beginning to get lost from myself. The joy of getting lost is the joy of Sabbath. Losing oneself is finding oneself dangerously. I was experimenting with the fire of things in the midst of that desert. I was living from the fabric of which things are made, and that was hell. That was hell. Because in that world where I lived, there was no piety, there was no hope, unquote. Passion according to GH by Clarice Lispector. Let's design hope. Anders, you have the floor. Thank you.
Obrigado, Guto. Obrigado a todo
Thank you,
mundo.
Guto.
Realmente,
Thank you, everybody.
agora eu tô falando português, mas tudo bem, né?
I'm not speaking Portuguese, but it's okay.
Quero
Is it
agradecer
not?
todo mundo para...
So I'd like to thank you all for being here with us, for spending a Saturday morning with us. It was indeed an experience where we learned a lot. For me, obviously, and I hope our attempt to bring an external outlook on Rio de Janeiro, on Brazil, to try and trigger new processes, to try and enrich dialogue, basically. Because with this action, we will have planted some seeds. So let's hope they will sprout and grow going forward. And in order to have that, we will need other initiatives to help. And to help that, we have our Commons and Communities platform, as Guto mentioned, which is indeed a call for co-thinking and for co-dreaming. And it's also focused on showing the great cultural wealth, the wealth of resilience, the wealth of initiative by the people, particularly in the Rocinha surroundings and in the other communities in Rio de Janeiro, so we can show this wealth and these initiatives to the world, including in the Copenhagen Congress in 2023. In that year, we are preparing at the Denmark Cultural Institute, we are preparing to take some of Rio de Janeiro over there. That's being constructed together with the Copenhagen Municipality and the Congress Organizing Committee for the Congress in 23 in Copenhagen. With that, we will not only bring Rio de Janeiro to Copenhagen, but we'll also bring Brazil to Europe and the global south to the global north, ultimately, because that touches on the various dimensions that Melissa was sharing with us, which are so important today. And ultimately, it's all going to contribute to better develop the vision for this UIA Congress in Copenhagen in the year of 2023, which is looking at sustainable futures, leaving nobody back and behind, leave no one behind, sustainable futures. So thank you all very much for being with us here today. And I did enjoy, and I am certainly going to enjoy watching this seed sprout going forward. Thank you very much.